I'd like to say thanks for taking the time out to watch this tape. We're going to demo our game, BioWare game, Neverwinter Nights. It's being developed by BioWare, and it's being published by Black Isle Studios, a division of Interplay. Now, the game Neverwinter Nights, the whole idea behind it was to take basically pen and paper Dungeons and Dragons to the PC, verbatim, exactly as it is. To that end, we're basically bringing over the same constructs. Pen and paper, you have a DM client, or you have a DM. We have a DM client. Pen and paper, you play one player, plays one character. So we're doing the same. As well, pen and paper, you adventure on a pre-written story, what's called a module. Same thing in Neverwinter Nights. Our goal here is to basically take the game and take those golden moments when you're playing, in other computer games, you're playing a multiplayer game, a massively multiplayer game. You've got that social interaction, you've got that group feeling, everybody's going together, you're sharing a really social activity. And then on the other hand, you've got a single player game where you've got purpose. You're always being driven along by a story. And you're a hero in the game. You're someone who matters. You're not one of 1,000 generic people. What we're doing is taking both of those great things and combining them together and building what we call a story-based multiplayer role-playing game. You have purpose, you have the social interaction, basically everything we can think of to make an RPG great. Along that end, we've developed a bunch of technology that we've put together. We have a graphics engine, which we call the Aurora graphics engine. Aurora is based on a lot of our early work on MDK2, where we developed what we called the Omen engine. Now, with Aurora, we've taken all that Omen had to offer, which was quite a lot, with dynamic lighting. You have a smoothly interpolating animation system and a really powerful particle system. And we've added to that a couple new features, a dynamic shadowing solution and another thing called environment mapping. I'll touch on environment mapping a bit later, but here as another character walks up, you can see the dynamic shadowing. The idea is that everything in the environment casts shadows. I have my torch, which is a light source. It's basically casting out anything that obstructs that light, casts a shadow just as it would in the real world. What this gives us is atmosphere, ambience you would never get without that kind of shadowing system. It just adds so much to the feel of the world as you're in it. You see something moving in the darkness, you're not quite sure what it is. So you bring the torch closer, the shadows move. It could be shadows moving, it could be a creature. Here you can see the shadow sweep across the wall as he walks up. Now, additionally, the shadows also will represent kind of your viewable volume. If there's shadows there with the torch that he's carrying, chances are his line of sight will not penetrate there either. So as he walks through this archway, you can see the shadow sweep across. Now that essentially represents his line of sight as well. If there were a creature in that shadow, it would actually be obstructed. He would not be able to see that creature. Here, as he's walking along top, you can see down below in the city, the little parapets on the wall are casting shadows down below. Now, if I were a character standing down below, I'd see these shadows sweeping across and be, what? Oh, there must be somebody up on top of that wall. I don't know where they were. Here we've got an encounter with a guard character. It's basically a pre-scripted NPC. He tells the characters that it's 5 hours till dawn. Beware the night. Apparently it's a bad neighborhood. So the story in this demo is we've got the two characters who have hooked up in the marketplace and formed a party. They want to go on an adventure, and to that end, they've decided they need their equipment. Now the fighter character plays a lot on this server, and he's petitioned the DM and has a house here. In his house, he's got a happy little fireplace, just casting shadows here that you can see. And he's also got all of his equipment. So he'll head upstairs and he'll put his equipment on. Now you'll notice some things about the environment here. You've got little candles on the wall, you've got a bookcase here and there. Just around the side there, there's a kitchen. Now we've got a load screen here while we head to the upstairs area. Looks like Rob's taken the transition twice, so we'll get him to just walk up the stairs again. But you can see down here, you've got all of the candles, the bookcase, so on. Everything's built into the environment. Here you've got pictures on the wall and so on. I'd like to talk a bit about the user interface. We're using what we call a radio menuing system. The idea with the radial is it's there when you need it, it's not when you don't. It's a fast system, very easy to learn, and very quick once you get good at it. Now, the whole system is based on a target action model. Now, the target here is a suit of armor. Rob's clicked on the armor, and all the actions he can perform appear on the outside. So here he can examine the armor, could cast a spell on it, could equip it, could trap the item, or he could pick it up. Well, we'll get him to pick up the armor because it's his armor. Trapping it probably wouldn't be such a good idea. So now he's got the armor, he pops up his inventory screen, and he equips the armor. You'll notice that the inventory screen was also transparent. The whole idea that we're aiming for with the GUI is it will not block what is going on in the game. You will always be able to see what is happening. You'll never lose an enemy behind an interface panel. Now here Rob's gone over, there's a sword. He just clicks on it, sets it to equip right, his character walks over, equips it directly to his right hand. Now here we can see him swing the sword a bit. You'll notice we added a little motion blur to the effect. Just little enhancements here and there that'll add a ton of feel to the combat system and to the game in general. So now Rob goes back downstairs. He's equipped, ready to go, and we'll get our characters to head out. So they head over, open up the door, and head outside. Now here we've got a temporary loading screen with some debug text. It's telling us that there's constructing tile X of 196. Now that indicates to me the essentially size of the area that we're walking into. Now that 196 tiles doesn't sound that large, but the tiles are actually 10 meters in size. This entire area that they're in probably takes about 5 to 10 minutes to walk across. It's quite a large area. In the final game, you'll be able to create areas that are 32 by 32 in size. This one, I believe, is 18 by 18. You can see some of the variety in the environment. You've got a tree over there. On the right-hand side, you've got this large wall. We encounter another pre-scripted guard here. He basically warns them again of the danger in the area. Now, we've just set that guard up on a simple patrol. He just walks from one end of the little square here to the other. And you'll be able to do the same thing in the editor. You'll notice that there's buildings off to the left there. They weren't lined up. They weren't square with everything. Now, just because the game's tile-based doesn't mean everything has to line up on perfect squares. Now here we've got a couple characters standing off to the side. What we've got here is we've got two NPCs that we've gone in and pre-scripted to have a little conversation. The idea with the conversation is we're trying to tell the players what the story is without directly interacting with them. So we've got a two-player conversation scripted. One character is essentially the master, one character is basically the slave in the conversation. He's directing the conversation. The idea is you can use this system to convey to the players story and background, what's going on in the game, without having to always have someone walk up to them and talk to them. It also, you can use it to build atmosphere. When they're in a bar, they overhear a rumor, so on. It just allows a lot more freedom. It makes the environment a lot more immersive. So now we've come to a large doorway here. We'll get Rob to open up the door and head in. We're entering the graveyard area. Now outside he was walking on cobblestones, which you would just simply, in the editor, grab the paintbrush, grab some cobblestones and paint them down. Here you would just select graveyard, paint down some graveyard. Now off to the right there you can see a tree. Now a tree's not something you want to pop in any time when you're painting, so it's what we call a feature. It's something you want to explicitly place. Same with this open grave you can see off to the left. It's something you don't want appearing everywhere, you want it exactly where you want it. So go into the editor, pick it as a feature and place it exactly where you want it. Up ahead we can see another NPC character that we've got in here. Her name is the Abbess Elaine. She's a priestess of Lathander who's god of the morning, and there's a local abbey nearby where she presides. She basically warns the players that there's some kind of danger down in the mausoleum, and she wishes them well. But our characters, being fairly strong, they aren't afraid. They continue on and head down. So now we've got another area transition here. It's constructing tile X of 144. Okay, we have the party here arrived in a dungeon environment. Now, since it is a dungeon environment, we want to fortify the party in some manner. So we'll get the sorcerer's character to cast a strength spell on the fighter. She runs up, launches into a strength spell, and you can see some of the effects that appear over his head. Now we'll switch over to the sorcerer's character, and we'll see what the spell casting actually looks like from her. Okay, we talked about the radial menu, basically target action interface. So Calvin's picked himself as the target, and the actions he can perform appear around it. Now he's got the cast spell action up. And you'll notice around the outside there's a circle of icons. That's basically a preview of the next level of the menu. So we'll get him to head on. Now the options he can perform here, he can cast from one of his favorite spells. He could do cast from one of the 3 spell capable classes that he has, or he could do something called Magical Tactics. And Magical Tactics is new to 3rd edition D&D, and we can't go into it too much until they release the rules. Suffice to say, it adds a lot of excitement to spellcasting. What we've got here is the next level. He's got his choice of spells, cantrips through level 9 spells. We'll get him to cast level 3. Now, since it's a demo, we've hacked in the spells at all levels, so we'll get him to cast a strength spell. Now here you can see how the lighting is affecting the environment while he's casting the spell. You can see the particles swirling around, and then you can see this animated mesh appear above his head, transparent, symbolizing the strength that's being added to his character. So now that we've got both characters substantially fortified, we'll swap back to the fighter, and we'll head on through our little adventure. Now this whole dungeon environment is simply painted down in the editor using tiles. And what we've passed here on the right is what we call a group. Now the idea of a group is it's something that's too large for one tile to represent adequately, like a large building, or in that case, a shrine. The idea with groups is you can go in, select the group, place it where you want it. It'll automatically appear, and it'll appear correctly. So we're in a fairly hostile environment. Our sorcerer's character starts to get a little more paranoid. So she decides she should summon in some help. And she casts in a summon spell. And we have a fire elemental. Now the fire elemental is currently executing a script that we call Love PC. In the actual game, you'll be able to control what the fire elemental does. You'll be able to give him orders and so on. Right now, he just finds the closest PC he can, and he hangs out following them. So we'll get our characters to continue on here. Now you can see some of the dynamic lighting right at the edge of the screen. You can see how it's very dark, and as the characters walk up with the torch, it actually gets lighter. You see just up at the top of the screen there's a little something glinting there. It's actually a pair of Umber Hulks. They rush in to attack the party. Now you've got the one Umber Hulk attacking the fighter, and the fire elemental is chasing down the other one. Looks like the fighter's won against his Umber Hulk, and the fire elemental launches into his attack. Between the 3 of them, they manage to quickly take down both Umber Hulks. Now what this shows is just kind of a typical little dungeon environment. Something you can sit down in the editor, quickly create, place a couple monsters, and just the feeling of adventuring through it. You can see the shadows moving at the edge of the screen. You can see something dimly off the edge. You're not quite sure what it is. Basically the feeling of being in a dungeon and feeling kind of an oppressive environment around you. So now what I'd like to do is to end this demo and start up the second one. Now we've seen one little dungeon environment. We saw basically the 2 tile sets in this adventure. The town tile set shows off the city environment, and the crypt tile set, which shows off kind of a dungeon environment. Now what we're firing up here, the second demo is more tailored to role-playing. The idea, we'll have Rob log in as the cleric, actually as the Abbess Elaine, who we met in the last demo. The story in this module is basically a lot more character focused in terms of the Abbess Elaine is a priestess. at the local temple of Lathander. Lathander's god of the morning. So the temple that you can see, the abbey that you can see, has a very open kind of airy feel to it. There's no roof on it, to embrace the morning. And inside you can see we have another character. Now, this is the high priest. He basically meets up with Elaine and tells her a tale of a group of pilgrims who were traveling to the abbey, and they were transporting a sacred chalice to be used in a religious rite. Now the pilgrims never made it. The high priest, fearing the worst, asks her to investigate and provides her with a suit of partial plate mail to help her on her way. She sees the partial plate mail, thanks him for the assistance, and agrees to take on the task of tracking down the pilgrims and hopefully finding the chalice. And what's neat here is the high priest could have been a pre-scripted NPC, as he was in this case. He could have been run by a live DM, or he actually could be played by another player character. That's the freedom of the system. The interaction between characters is identical, whether they're computer controlled or player controlled, or DM controlled. So now that we've got the abbess outside, we'll get her to put her armor on. And we'll also get Rob to drag his weapons down to the quick bar. The idea with the quick bar is it's at the bottom. It's a way to make items quickly accessible. So we'll get him to put his inventory away. And now you can see the character. Now you notice something about the armor she's wearing. The metal actually looks like metal. Now the technique we're using is called environment mapping. A lot of other people are doing it, but we're doing it a little bit differently. You notice as the camera rotates around, there's the shininess, there's a silver and a gold on her chest plate, but just above that, there's green cloth, which isn't shiny at all. This technique that we've come up with basically allows us per pixel control of the shininess of the material. In addition to that, we also have a color layering system which allows us to set 6 different player colors. So you can set your hair tone, your flesh tone, 2 armor colors, and 2 clothing colors. In addition to that, we're also doing over 2,000 player models. So you can definitely go in and just cater the look of your character to how you want it. You can be an individual in an environment. You don't have to look like everybody else. What Rob's showing off here is the character walking in and out of the shadow. The shadow's just not a static polygon cast on the ground. It's actually a dynamic shadow cast in the entire environment. When the character walks under, she's shadowed just like she should be. Everything in the game casts shadows and interacts with shadows. Here we have chickens. As they walk along, they have shadows on the ground. Rob picks the chicken, right-clicking on it, brings up the portrait. The idea with the character portrait is to identify what you're operating on, that whole target action idea. What we have here is an encounter. The abbess has just seen a character off the top of the screen. Now, if this were pen and paper D&D and I was the dungeon master, right now I'd be telling you about it, saying, up ahead you see a character clothed in green. He dressed possibly as a ranger or a woodsman. He's bending down to pick something up. You can't quite make out what it is. He turns to you and says, well, here he's indicated that an ogre has attacked this wagon and that he was there and observed it. In return for, or in the encounter, he was actually damaged by the ogre. So he volunteers in return for some healing to lead the abbess to where the ogre resides and hopefully where her chalice is now. She agrees to the bargain and casts a heal spell on him. So she goes into a heal spell. And you can see the effect. That's a pretty nice effect for a spell like Cure Light Wounds. You can just imagine what we're going to do with a spell like Raise Dead or something like that. Personally, I can't wait to see Meteor Swarm or something equally powerful. So now that the character's been healed, we'll get him to head off and we'll continue into the forest, or we'll continue on to find the ogre. Now the area they're in is what we call a rural tile set. The idea here is it's very open, very airy space, a couple trees here and there, but very open grassland was kind of the theme behind the tiles. The tile set we're going into is what we call the Deep Woods tile set. So we'll get the characters to head in. And the idea with the Deep Woods tile set was to convey the feeling of being in a forest. You're in amongst huge trees, underneath a forest canopy. There's some light shafts shining through, there's some leaves falling down, little bits of fluff here and there as well. And this is what the forest environment looks like. Fairly sharp visual environment. And what's really neat about this is that it is still tile-based. You can simply go in, build the environment on a simple tile-based manner. Paint down, oh, I want some trees over here, I want a road here. Oh, over here I want to put in a little wall. Simple matter of going into the tool, picking the appropriate brush, and painting it down where you want. You don't have to worry about putting in shafts of light, setting lighting, anything. It's all done for you. You want to paint down some bottomless chasm? It's a simple matter of selecting the brush, painting down some bottomless chasm. If you want to make a bridge, you just take a road brush, paint it over the chasm, and you have a bridge. Additionally, you could even go in here and add a little trigger event that fires off a sound effect. Now we have the sound of a soaring eagle in, essentially just to help convey the feeling of being in an open, huge chasm yawning in front of you. You can do things like that to add just ambience and feeling to the environment. So back to the story, it appears the ogre resides just across the bridge here. Now our ranger character Menthis has volunteered to go and distract him, and the cleric will attempt to recover the chalice. So we'll get the characters to head on. You notice that the cleric has her weapons unequipped, so she's readied her spells. Now Menthis heads up front, and we can see by the huge set of ankles up top that he's met the ogre. The ogre sets off after him, and it appears Menthis isn't quite as brave as he made himself out to be. He actually seems to be somewhat of a coward. Luckily, the cleric manages to cast her Flame Strike spell, which takes the ogre down. Up above we can see, oh, there's the treasure. She's recovered the chalice. So we'll switch over, see what our other character's doing. Now he asks her if she's got the chalice. She indicates that she's found it. He's quite happy about this. You'll notice he's already got a bit of gold in his inventory. She puts some of the treasure on the ground and attempt to share it. And the thief character backstabs her. What this shows is just the power to role play that Neverwinter Nights offers. You can go in, play the character you want to be, play with your own motivation, your own reason for doing what you do. And when you're playing with other characters, they're doing the exact same thing. You can be playing along with the ranger in your party. At some key moment, he turns on you, and it turns out he isn't a ranger at all. When you met him, all you knew, he was a character who was clothed in green. We assumed he was a ranger because that's what he said. In actuality, he was a thief, and the instant he had the opportunity, he backstabbed the other player and took the treasure. What we've come up with as well is what we call the idea of house rules. House rules allows you to essentially customize your game to how you want it. On my game that I run, my house rules, I allow players to kill other players, but I don't allow players to play dwarves. I don't like dwarves. Whereas Calvin might allow, he doesn't like gnome characters, but he does not allow player killing. The idea is the freedom to customize the game and build it how you want it, to have people play by the rules that you agree on. So that shows off the basics of some of the role-playing freedom you have in this game. So now we'll get Rob to fire up the editor. We talked a bit about creating an area. Now let's see what it actually takes to create an area. So Rob goes in, launches up the Aurora tool set. First we'll get him to load in a module that we've created, E3 Demo 1 module. He loads up Area 1. In the first demo we started up in a town environment, which is what he's loading here. What you can see is the entire town environment. We started out in the little marketplace, just to the north of his cursor there. We headed up the little ramp and around. What's neat here is this entire environment, 18 by 18 area, is created just using the brushes in the editor. Paint down what you want, where you want it, some graveyard here, and so on. And it's actually using the in-game tiles. So everything in the game, you can get a preview of it when you're building it. You can see what it's actually going to look like. Right down to the same stone textures, same everything. So now that you've seen an area that we've created, we'll get Rob to fire out, create his own area. He goes in, picks a name for the area. He calls it Area 51. Seems like a good name for an area. He goes into the tile set, picks out the TDC01 tile set. Currently this is still an early version. The TDC01 indicates to me that it's the crypt tile set. He selects a 10 by 10 area, and currently it's loading in the tiles. Now, since it is the dungeon tile set that he's loading, it'll create walls all around bordering the area. So now we've got our 10 by 10 area. Rob's popped it up. We'll get him to head over, grab the pit paintbrush, go into painting mode, and start laying down some bottomless pit. He simply clicks down and starts dragging the mouse, and it paints down pit exactly where he wants it. Now earlier we mentioned the idea of groups. So we'll get Rob to jump over to groups. He picks out the temple, or I called it the shrine when we met it, and he plops it down. So it instantly creates a larger thing than you could possibly create out of an individual tile. Drops it in, he selects corridor, starts painting down some bridge structure. So now that we've got the basics of an area laid out here, we'll get Rob to just set a player start. Get him to save out the area. We'll save it out as demo.mod, sure. Now he quits out of the editor. And what you can see here is the server and something called console E3. Now the idea is the server is a very clean application. It has no user interface. It is actually as naked as we can make it. The idea there is to keep the stability of the server as high as possible. It interfaces with something we call the server monitor, which basically manages the user interface to the server. So now we can see that Rob's jumped up in the environment that he's created, and Calvin's joined him. So we'll get him to walk around. And you notice he put the start point out on that little bridge. Now he continues on the little bridge, and you can see just off to the right the little shrine that he created, just by dropping it down as a group. Now he didn't have to go in, he didn't have to set lighting levels, he didn't have to make torches, attach them to the walls there or to parts of the shrine. It was all done for him. The idea with the toolset is no matter who you are or how good you are, you can go in and create a visually striking environment, something that looks quite sharp. Now with creatures and so on, it'll be just as easy to go in. Grab a creature, drop them down there. Oh, I want this NPC in here, I want him to say this. Oh, I want to put this item down. We're basically building a toolset that allows anybody to go in quickly and easily create a graphically stunning adventure. That's kind of the power of the whole system. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to this whole presentation, and I hope you have a really good sense of what the project is and what it's all about. Thanks again.